thanks everyone for coming. And actually, this isn't just me. We've got a project where we're looking at little pinks in online information spaces. Myself, I'm Tim Niven, research lead at Doublethink Lab, and my colleague Cecile, who's our machine learning engineer and all-around data science star. And this is a project done in in collaboration with the Pittsburgh University Computational Social Dynamic Lab, with Urul In and Ahana Biswani. I kind of get the sense that the argument I'm about to present is going to be preaching to the choir in this room. So the argument I want to make is why study little pinks, and part of that argument is why they're actually related to PRC information manipulation. And why I need to make this argument is probably a concept called mirroring, which I first heard Glenn Tiffert talk about, which is the tendency for us to look at phenomena in the PRC through the lens of our own societies. So there could be somebody who said, for example, little pinks, they're just PRC nationalists. Same thing as in any other country. Well, I'm about to present an argument why you shouldn't accept that. Before I do, this is it in a nutshell. This is why study little pinks in a nutshell, but the argument for why it's linked to PRC information manipulation will follow. So first, a couple of definitions really quickly. This foreign information manipulation interference is a really nice concept shared with us by the European External Action Service. Really nice concept because it's broader than disinformation and propaganda. So it's going to capture more practices that are a little bit more subtle about like intentional manipulation in information spaces that are kind of broader, which simple definitions of disinformation and propaganda don't cover. When it comes to the definition of a little pink, we have this, self-motivated PRC nationalist spreading and amplifying PRC state media aligned messages. And if you want a little bit of a deeper dive into the history and some of the, definitional aspects, there's a really nice article I've linked to here. We would like to distinguish a little pink from a little pink account. So the little pink would be the person behind the account. But obviously, if we look at the surface level, just a content-based definition of a little pink, spreading, amplifying content aligned with PRC state media, obviously the people behind that account could be any number. And obviously, when you're doing investigations, as we do, you look at an account and you really don't know who's behind the account. So kind of at the start, you have this looks like a pink, could be someone in the PLA. Another important concept, the last definition, is participatory propaganda. So propaganda, obviously, I'm trying to send a message to you. I'd like for you to believe it or for it to change your behavior or beliefs in some way. But if I'm a really savvy propagandist, you're also going to become a creator of the very same propaganda that suits my strategic goals. And quite obviously, little pinks are exactly that. Okay, so now onto this argument for why little pinks are related to PRC information manipulation. And the first point is probably enough to kind of close the book, and that is that sometimes pinks initiate the disinformation that ultimately ends up in PRC information warfare. And we have this very tragic case in 2019 in Taiwan, the Kansai airport incident. The particular disinformation was that the the Taiwanese ambassador in Osaka was not helping the Taiwanese people during a typhoon, and it was the PRC ambassador that stepped in and did it. Very tragic result in this case. Another reason why pinks are related to PRC FEMI is that the state organizes them. For example, in brigading, we have this case of the boycott of H&M, which did start with a pink account, but then the Communist Youth League, which is part of the state, amplifies it, blows it up, turns it into a full-on brigading campaign. We also have the idea that the information environment in the PRC itself is manipulated, obviously, by the CCP. If you try and say the wrong thing, you will be censored, it'll just be deleted. And if you want to thrive in this environment, there's obviously certain parameters in which you are going to thrive. We have this great quote here from Ya Chou describing the information environment inside the Great Firewall as one giant QAnon. And so this is an information environment that is being created and managed by the CCP. And this has led to the rise of opportunistic pinks. So if you're in this environment, you can make a career for yourself, build clout, personal brand, leverage it into advertising, paid content. And so, so taking advantage of this information environment that has been created. You might have seen this before if you're in the session with my colleagues talking about the Ukraine-based information in the PRC information environment. We've got this kind of dynamics, these different layers in the PRC information, FEMI kind of world. And the pinks in the state have some interesting dynamics that we've been observing. We've got kind of a hypothesis that's been borne out across a number of cases, which is this complementary dynamics among the pinks in the state. So obviously sometimes an event will happen, the state will set the tone, the pinks will follow. Sometimes the pinks can start it, and then the state will reverberate the message, and then maybe it'll pick up even more steam. And this is quite challenging to really traditional, straightforward notions of attribution. And so this slide kind of tries to capture that. We have in this giant QAnon, we've got this kind of superstructure, a set of canonical narratives and tropes that are officially driven, and obviously things that are not officially sanctioned are just not going to make it in there. So events in the world are going to happen, and the pinks don't really need to wait for the officials. They know what the canonical narratives and tropes are, and they can just take this event and interpret it right away as CCP propaganda. Officials can come in and do, amplify that. Interestingly, with some of the more weird conspiracy theories that we've seen, obviously we do sometimes see, for example, the US started COVID, explicitly stated. But in many cases, the kind of nature of conspiracy theory discourse, the state will come out and just imply things or ask questions or juxtapose things. And we'll see an example of this soon. Okay, I think I'm handing over to Cecile.
Tim has introduced the reason why we're studying the little pink is important. And here I'm going to focus more on the practical problem why we build the little pink classifier. After we give a definition of the little pink, the next step for us is to collect data from them. And then we want to monitor their behavior. So we developed two classifiers. One is to classify the text, and the other one is to classify the account. Okay, and our text classifier distinguishes the Twitter post between anti-CCP and pro-CCP and or the neutral. And for every account, we collect 3,200 tweets from them. And through the classifier, we can get the prediction of each tweet to know the statement of the tweet. And for every account, we use the statistics of the prediction of tweets to train the account classifier. As we can see from the slides, the post prediction, which means if we have we have post and our confidence score, the first confidence score of the first post is 97%, and for the next post, the model give it a label of as neutral, and the confidence score is 56%, and our classifier for the account prediction is we think this Xiao Zhonghua, he is little pink, and our confidence score is 98%. And our classifies F1 score. F1 score is a mathematical estimation of the model performance. To be simply, we can regarded as a accuracy. Our account prediction for Little Pink accuracy is 90%, and our model to predict the anti-CCP is even higher.
Thank you, Cecile. So move on to a little bit of a case study of an analysis we did using this classifier to give you a sense of some of the things that we can do with it. So in the first case, we scrape a lot of data related to the Ukraine biolabs, and we end up with like a retweet network. We've filtered out many of the nodes here just to try and give you more of a clean sense of the fact that there's 3 communities here, and we can immediately and automatically see where the pinks live. And so, there's not just the 3 big communities here. There's many accounts on the side, kind of like satellites, things that are loosely connected to the main communities on Twitter that we can also see. So that really helps us very quickly focus on what we want to. That allows us to ask questions such as, what are the most retweeted tweets for different groups? For example, on the left, if you look at PRC state media and commercial media, it's this tweet from Guantaza. And this tweet claims, pretty much just reports Russian state media, that in the Ukraine biolabs, they were conducting experiments with bat coronavirus samples. Very clear, kind of what I was saying before. We've got this kind of implication that COVID was created in the Ukraine biolabs. On the right, we have the most retweeted little pink. And this is getting a little bit more explicit. It is a little bit later, actually. So actually, Global Times did post an article in PRC Internal Information Environment. Again, it was just juxtaposing these 2 things. A really interesting discourse structure in that article. They just talk about the existence of the Ukraine biolabs. Then in the next paragraph, they just move into talking about this claim that COVID created Moderna. In that article, they don't actually explicitly link the 2. So they're not really making the conspiracy claim. But of course, the pinks will see this and they'll just kind of run away with it. So when it comes to this claim about the bats, we can also use data to ask questions about these dynamics. So we were talking before about these dynamics between pinks and the state. And we actually can be quite precise with this bat keyword in this data and pick out these tweets pretty effectively. And kind of smoothing over some mathematical details, basically what you're seeing here is if a higher peak means more associated with the label. So what we see is the PRC state media lead this. They're the first to post it. They lead it. After about 2 hours, the pinks pick it up, start to spread it. And then after that, the anti-CCP community will come in and start responding, saying that's nonsense, whatever. Interestingly, we do see a little pink peak with the PRC as well. Funnily enough, it kind of looks unnatural. And funnily enough, if you look at the accounts in that peak, they do show a lot of signs of inauthenticity. And some have already been removed by Twitter. Another thing we can look at is the, again, dynamics between these two groups and these communities. So one of the things we see is in replies, the pinks actually reply more than anything to the anti-CCP accounts, which is consistent with their role of kind of, going and doing battle on behalf of the CCP. When it comes to retweets, it's interesting that they retweet the state media more than themselves. Cecile?
Here, I just want to remind that Tim have mentioned our model of canonical narratives and tropes, and we can also see these dynamics in the recent A4 movement in China, and as we all know that in November 14th, the HK protest song was played instead of China anthem in the regional rugby tournament in South Korea. So, and observed from our data that the Global Times and Sina and Guancha responds to this event by claiming Hong Kong protest in 2019 is the mob behavior and is caused by the so-called foreign forces. And of course, little pinks on Twitter keep spreading this claim for the next few days. And then in November 24th, the Ulu, sorry, okay, the Urumqi fire happened, and the next day, November 25th, multiple protests against the zero COVID policy was on the street. Until, as we see from the, this slide, the November 26th, the pinks making conspiracy about the connection of protest and the foreign forces. As I draw a red line, I draw underline, the red underline, yeah. And what happened next? Okay, we saw from the slide that there's a journalist, a BBC journalist is beaten and is arrested by the China government. So this message gives the pinks a signal that they think they catch the evidence of the connection of foreign forces and the protest. Okay. And then in the November 29th, a Zhao Lijian, he claimed that the BBC distorted the truth and is attacking China. Okay, and finally, the China official, they urge vigilance against the foreign forces. And this flow, which is the start from the China official, implicitly imply conspiracy and followed by the pinks and go back to the official, is what we call the canonical narrative pattern of China. Thank you very much.
Okay, so, okay. So very quickly, just a cursory analysis there of what we were looking at with those foreign forces tweets. We find in the sample actually more anti-CCP accounts than pinks, which is really interesting because the protesters are clearly actually owning this narrative. The most retweeted tweet is the one on the right. It's kind of a funny situation where, you know, they're talking about what foreign forces, you know, influencing China. Is it Marx and Engels? And so that, yeah. And again, the reply dynamics show us that the pinks are prioritizing attacking the anti-CCP accounts, or what they perceive as the anti-CCP accounts, the Li Laosi, and etc. So that's just a little cursory analysis of that. But the main point, obviously, being we see that, again, the dynamics and the conspiracy theorizing. To sum up, future work that we're working on here. So we developed this for the Chinese language on Twitter because it was easy and quick and helped us to develop fast. Moving to Weibo or more long-form texts is going to be good. YouTube as well, Chinese and English, and also Twitter English, where they obviously lots of pinks. Integrating this with monitoring software so that we can, you know, try and get a sense of what's trending, what's, you know, really important in peak communities at each point in time might help us catch the next Kansai airport incident before it happens. We've also got some propaganda detection techniques that we're working on. Work on some of these semi-automatic approaches to try and pick apart the types of the pink accounts. When is it an influencer versus a pink versus an internet army, etc. And tracking of dominant tropes and narratives. And very happy to take any questions you have. Before I do, very big thank you to our partners at Pitt University. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for this interesting presentation. My name is Brian Tibrak. I work at the U.S. mission in Kazakhstan. It sounds like you're going to get into this question maybe in future research, but do you have any theories or did you find anything about how these narratives are disseminated beyond the Chinese language media space? And what role the little pinks have in pushing this kind of disinformation beyond just the Chinese domestic or Chinese language internet?
Yeah, as you say, this is a question, a kind of question that we'll be looking at in the future. We unfortunately haven't done the English language version yet. It's kind of just accidental. We thought the Chinese version was the top priority for us, particularly because, you know, we're from Taiwan, and we also received these attacks, as you saw with the Kansai airport incident. In this funding period, we are going to develop an English language version, which will allow us to start answering those questions. Thanks.
Thanks for the presentation, especially like the number of confidence matrices. It was very nice. My question is that behavior of little pink always following the same pattern that you showed? Like was the spike being around the official announcement and then a bit delayed? And if it's always following the same pattern, do you think any injections are possible to disrupt that pattern?
No, definitely not. There's definitely different kinds of patterns. This is an interesting case just because it was led by the PRC state media, but we definitely do see ones that start with pinks, and I would say authentic pinks, but also influencers seeking clout. I mean, why does a weird Weibo account start off with this Kansai airport thing? You know, you can build a brand, build a following, and maybe clout-seeking behavior is something that's really important in these dynamics.
Hi, name's Justin. A lot of the methodology you explained kind of resonates with a lot of work we're doing in Africa, and I think that it would apply in a very different context, also to other threat actors, not just to China. Is the tooling that you built open source? Would we be able to build on top of that and explore kind of ways of redeploying some of it? And then you said that English language kind of documentation still in process, but would you be open to collaborations on translations and kind of figuring out if this works elsewhere?
Short answer is yes. Slightly longer version. It takes a little bit of time to get it ready to open source it, but definitely something we want to do. Twitter data, obviously, we can't share legally, but we can give you tweet IDs. Unfortunately, as you might guess, a lot of the accounts in these data sets are getting deleted by Twitter. But we have thousands of annotated data points. There's still going to be a lot of data there. It's all in Chinese at the moment, but as I said, this funding period we'll be doing English, and I think that will open up for the room for more collaborations, which we are most certainly open to. Thank you.
Thanks very much. My name is Peggy. I'm not sure if this was outside the scope of this research set, but in terms of trying to understand how little pinks and little pinks are interacting online, or if they're getting actual organic engagement from quote-unquote normal internet users, I'm not really sure if you were able to see some of those dynamics in your research set, but fascinating work. Thank you.
A little bit, yes. We found that because we can kind of really almost comprehensively look at the networks of pinks, we can start to get a sense of where are the authentic pinks and where are the inauthentic ones. And one of the things we do see is kind of a core, a central little pink network with lots of what look like authentic accounts, and on the margins, kind of satellite communities with very strong signs of inauthenticity that kind of want to break in. We also see some really important nodes in the middle of the community which link out to the inauthentic satellites, which, funnily enough, show very strong signs of inauthenticity, and some of which Twitter have already removed. So short answer, yes, and thank you very much for the question.
Philip Nubel with Global Voices. I have a kind of Beijing question. How effective are those little pinks if, you know, the Chinese government invests, or as we know, some people do it out of their own volition. But I was curious if you saw, especially new accounts, if you have a sense, maybe, I'm sure case by case, of why, for example, at least in numbers, of course it could be bots, but why do you think certain strategies or accounts seem to be more successful?
I don't think I have a good answer, to be honest. I suspect one of the kind of funny things we've seen is a lot of inauthentic accounts with a name or a description, including the phrase "hulfol," which is like follow each other. And it's like really spammy. It's like hulfol 100%, like 15 times. And one of the indicators of inauthenticity in accounts is an equal number of followers and following. And we see lots of accounts that are like that, which is supposedly a sign of inauthentic network growth. So we suspect that there's a lot of inauthentic accounts in the network, and a lot of them go unnoticed for a long time and form a lot of connections, like thousands of connections in these networks. I think in this community, they seem to they're probably getting a lot of exposure and interactions. I'm guessing that's probably time up. Thank you very much.